Hey there, folks. It's Roger from There Be Giants. Welcome to another episode of Giant Talk. As usual, we are here to talk about OKRs and all matters related to OKRs. And I'm very, very pleased today to have Marc Applebaum joining us from, it's San Francisco, isn't it, Marc?
Yeah,
is that
San Francisco Bay Area. That's right.
It's a Bay Area. So you've got a much more beautiful location than I have, just being north of Manchester in the UK. I'm sure the weather's a lot nicer for you there anyway.
Oh, it's foggy right now. I'll tell you.
So, Marc, I mean, we've been talking a little bit recently. You are involved with an organisation, another consultancy that I've got a long history with, PM Squared. Do you want to just bring the listeners up to speed on a bit about you and where you fit into the picture and what you've done in the past?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, my collaboration with Brett Knowles, the founder of PM Squared, started way back in 25 years ago, basically. And that was out here in the Bay Area. I was coming into organizational work out of a psychology background. So my training is in psychology. So I'm part of the PM Squared team that brings that sort of emphasis and focus in psychology that came into coaching, more than 2 decades ago, and through a whole range of coaching experiences with agile teams in Silicon Valley out here, and then moving pretty quickly into performance management. And this is how I ended up in OKRs. So
right.
That's how
okay. And in terms of what you're doing with OKRs at the moment, just fill us in on that. What kind of clients are you working with? What kind of projects are you working on?
I mean, a whole range. So, PM Squared's experience in that domain is more than 3,000 implementations worldwide, and a whole variety of different domains in terms of business types and sectors. And me personally, I work with everyone from individual founders of startups and sole proprietorships to large corporations. And same with our team. We have that kind of breadth. Like I said, everyone on the team, for the most part, has long history inside of organizations, leading, managing, and I'm in a sense the odd man out because I come in having worked as a coach in organizations for all these years, but from a counseling, psychology, and coaching background.
And I guess that is a valuable perspective to bring. I think the key is to combine all those perspectives, isn't it? That's where the value really lies. But having those different perspectives, is really important.
Particularly because of the change aspect, the change aspect of introducing any kind of system, like, again, to touch on our theme, whatever we call it, whether we call it objectives and key results or whether we use another acronym, it's helping people make that change. And I'd say, step out of the drive to quickly achieve results long enough to be able to get to a higher level, think about what are we ultimately trying to achieve, what are our targets, how are we expressing them, are we all on the same page? And you touched upon the focus of really what we're here to have a good chat about today. Because just to bring listeners up to fill you in on how we've arrived at this today, we've had separate offline conversations, and something we really started to reflect on quite a lot, wasn't it? Was around actually, the term OKRs has been pretty popular now for 6 or 7 years. I know they've been around a lot longer than that, but you can trace it back in particular to when John wrote his book and so on and so forth. So, in the way the market has moved in terms of adoption and maturity, I think we can say that we've kind of got through the hype phase, and I think organizations are starting to, get a bit more of a sense of what OKRs are there to achieve, and it's about putting the time and effort and investment into building alignment. And so therefore, if they're not calling them OKRs, does that mean that they're potentially they're missing out on that, or or is there something else which they could be using, which will deliver the same results and essentially is the same as OKRs, but just by a different name? What matters, if we stop calling them that, if we call them something else, we were kind of reflecting on that, weren't we?
I mean, personally, I'm very agnostic about acronyms. Acronyms in general are not, I really miss the point. So for sure, if I think our journey in helping people get aligned as organizations is about clearly defining what it is we're aiming for and how we're gonna recognize, either by measuring it or by observing it, how our progress in getting there. So whatever enables us to do that, I really don't care what you call it. And there's so many methodologies out there. There's an alphabet soup of different names. And so my question for someone, whatever you're using, whichever one of those systems you're using, what's working for you? Right? If you're already using one, what's working for you? That's and if you're not using one, OKRs is a great place to start. I mean, there's a great deal of clarity in that system, but it's not about the letters. That's for sure.
I don't know how you found it in the past, but some clients kind of have looked at OKRs and have gone, well, we need to kind of adapt them to integrate them with what's there. And that can mean that they might change the labels, the terms a little bit, tweak them, so on and so forth. But then others go, no, what we've had in the past hasn't really worked that well. So we want just a clean slate, a new start. So let's call them OKRs because we've never had something like that before. So there's culture, there's history, there's all sorts that's wrapped up in it, isn't it, for a client?
Oh, of course. I mean, we've definitely encountered organizations where they had an implementation that didn't go well, and so they want to change the name because they do need that fresh start, and no problem. That's because the issue isn't the packaging. It's what are we actually doing as a leadership team? How are we getting focused together? Are we putting in the time, which we tend to do intensively at PM Squared. Right at the beginning of the process, we really get in deep with the team to help them in that process of defining and working together to arrive at a shared strategy map. But to get that clarity up front, whatever we call it. Even strategy map, I can easily let go of that term as well, right?
Yeah. So I think we're very much in agreement on, we don't care what you call them. I guess it's so long as you kind of follow the principles and practices that underpin them, maybe.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think this is the other thing that's on my mind in this conversation is like, as much as I'm agnostic about how we label things, to help a leadership team internalize a simple, straightforward process about defining things and to focus the conversation. Process does count for a lot at the beginning, I think, because we're trying to build repeatable habits. I know we're going to get to that more later, the habits part of this. So, we don't want to get glued to process in a way where it becomes just mechanical. But at the very beginning, part of the learning curve, and I guess I'm betraying the fact that I'm also an academic. I also teach, right? But I think at the beginning of the learning process, it's really important to give people a straightforward roadmap about what are the steps in expressing objectives and key results, and to use that language. What does it take? What are the ingredients in setting a clear target, so that the whole team and therefore when we cascade down to the whole organization, we're all sort of playing off the same musical score, to put it that way. We can all read the same notes. We can see what we're doing. We can harmonize together on that.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Playing off the same musical score. And okay, you talked about getting an executive team, a leadership team to internalize a simple process. How often have we seen not just leadership teams, but just organizations as a whole overcomplicate the process?
Oh, well, remember, I come from psychology background, so I'm fully aware of how complicated we are as human beings. But I think, what I mean by simple process is, when we can define, let's say, for example, if we define an objective as a noun and a verb, then, that sounds pretty simplistic, right? But I mean, what I think at the outset, some simple guidelines like that help people to get through the process of formulating without writing an essay about an objective, without and I think simplifying the aim for people actually, of course, helps us gather our attention and express ourselves more succinctly, and, understand each other. So that's the other side of it for me.
Yeah, very much so. I have what I've observed is that fear, actually, when it comes to the initial stages of setting up OKRs, I actually think that fear can be quite a strong emotion that drives the initial response. And I don't mean from a sort of adopting change point of view. I'm not talking about resistance, but I'm talking, for me, I think this has shown up in how leadership teams might want to use OKRs for, have far too many. They end up with far too. They can end up with far too many because they're fearful that they're going to, miss one particular plate that needs to keep spinning. Yeah. Whereas I don't know whether the reframe that we've always used for that is you think about the spotlight. If you sat in the audience and the spotlight shines on the stage, you know where to look, you know where the action's happening. But if you use a floodlight to illuminate the stage, you could be looking over to the right when the action's happening on the left. And I try to move them into a position or perhaps a frame of mind where they're thinking, actually, it does pay. It is rewarding. It is that there is potential gain in getting really specific and therefore having a the vital few when it comes to the number, because we want people to be focused on this, that, and the other, and that's it. We don't want any more. We want those three. We want A, B, and C. So what's your sense? Have you ever observed anything?
Oh, sure, like that? Sure. Yeah, it's a great point. I think. Just to stick with the floodlights, I think leading an executive team through setting strategy and OKRs, it is like turning the lights up.
Yeah.
It's turning the lights up really brightly, right? And that there's always some angst, some level of anxiety associated with the level of accountability and transparency is just turning up in the room now, right? And I think that the way that our team, the way that we try to frame that conversation, to take that angst down a notch or two, is look, number one, this is a time-bound exercise. So we come in, this is a 4 or 5 day exercise that we're going to work through top to bottom with you. And the important part of this process is not that we get we're not trying to get perfect OKRs here. We're trying to take a first pass at articulating your overall direction and strategy, and then turning it on. And turning it on is what counts. Turning on the process is what counts. Beginning to have those performance meetings where we're using these things, because that's what's going to enable you and levels down in the organization to refine them. So it's actually turning it on and beginning to have those conversations using the OKRs rather than obsessing over getting them perfect in the first place. Yeah, is what's going to lead them to be improved over time. And I'm sure we all emphasize the aim is not to set these in stone for forever. It's to create a solid starting point that we can then iterate off of and refine. And half or more of these OKRs are going to change in 6 months.
Yeah.
Because we're going to learn. We're going to learn that, we need to refine how we define things. Our targets need to be adjusted because circumstances change. Some of the metrics we thought we had, we actually don't.
Yeah.
We have to create them, maybe. That's another project. So all of these this is all part of the process. It's part of the journey. I think that's what, we try to normalize.
Yeah. Exactly. Try to normalize when indeed, again, my experience, just to come back to the point about fear, has, I've found a huge amount of anxiety can exist around it the desire to have it perfect from day one.
Right.
And so obviously, very similar to yourselves, the message has to be, don't expect perfection from day one. And they have to find a way to give themselves permission so that then they can give others permission for that as well.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And do you, I guess that kind of brings the element of role modeling into it, which is a big part of the change management, isn't it? That's the do as I do rather than just do as I say elements of it, isn't it? How do you work with a leadership team to kind of ease them into that sense of it's okay to not have it perfect, it's okay to in some respects be wrong?
That's a great question. So I think that since my personal emphasis is much more on the coaching side of an OKR process, I think that has a lot to do with how we train people in running the performance meetings themselves and any supportive input that people want from us along the way in terms of running those meetings. Because it's the tone that the leader sets, that she or he sets in that performance meeting that they're running with their team, that's going to either give that permission, right, to continue to discover, to work with the OKRs we have, to discover if they need to be refined along the way, to refresh them at the end of the quarter. It's the tone of permission and encouragement, honestly, from whoever owns that meeting that's going to set that tone for the whole team.
Yeah. No,
so I think that's really it. It's this is not a punitive exercise,
no.
Right? And that's building safety in the meeting is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. The elements of psychological safety is something we've talked about on here many times, and it's an essential for OKRs to work in a way that really delivers some serious value to the organisation.
That's right.
But just to kind of wrap up the point about the leadership and role modeling, I often find that leaders, I don't know whether forget. That's probably the polite way of putting it, but sometimes maybe don't perhaps care. But they do. You're absolutely right. They set the tone, and I think that it's something when we start off with the leadership team just doing we have kind of like a sort of launch session with the leadership team before we go anywhere near OKRs. Just to kind of set out the table. These are the practices and principles, in particular the principles, which really underpin OKRs. And if you're going to get the greatest value from your investment that you're making in terms of your time and your effort now, these are the things that we need to work on. And sometimes we even work with them to kind of get a good sense as to where they're at on those scales at this point in time, to see if there's any additional wraparound work that perhaps needs to be done, if you see what I mean. Is that something you've experienced from your clients as well?
I believe we're setting those norms and expectations, and honestly, like agreements among the leadership team themselves. It's almost like really forming a shared agreement about how are we going to work with these things.
Yes,
right at the beginning, and
it's
so
a bit of contracting almost, isn't it?
That's right. You're reading my mind. And I think that's obviously what you're on to in your practice. And I would say we do absolutely the same thing at the beginning in terms of setting expectations. Because again, like we're turning the light, we are helping people to turn the lights up much more brightly on performance, and so we have to build in common understanding, shared agreements, and enough trust to be able to sustain that. Like on the team, we're jumping into this process together. And so I think, building that foundation is really important before we get into the details of the objectives and key results themselves. I will say I do have a story for you about, you were asking about kind of modeling and the permission structure and all of that. And, here in the US, there's a lot of uncertainty in the healthcare field right now, around, especially those in nonprofit sector who rely to a certain degree on government funding. And I was actually doing some coaching work with the CEO of a healthcare organization just a couple of weeks ago. And, I helped them implement their OKRs. We've been through that process. And So I show up for the meeting, and he says, I really feel like we are off track, something along those lines. Obviously, he was not feeling good about where they were in their practice with OKRs. And the issue was the circumstances, the environment has changed radically, and that's grabbing all of our attention right now.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, wait a minute. This is what your OKR system is designed to help you adjust to. So this is not a mistake. There's a reason your attention is absorbed with what's happening at the federal level, how that's going to impact your funding, how that's going to impact what you're able to achieve this quarter for the rest of the year. This is actually, in your next meeting with the team, this is actually going to become the question for you to actually open up with the team. Do we need to revisit our targets given these circumstances, right? And I could see the relief. He actually thanked me. And it was real, right? Because it's that reminder. And I understand it because, this is someone who is so mission-driven and so concerned with delivering the services to patients and all those things. So I think a lot of the time what we provide is that reminder about what's the actual purpose of all of this? What's the purpose of having the OKR process in place in the first place? It's so that you are able to help you adjust and respond to changing circumstances just like this. So that was the relief. So that was,
completely. I mean, the last thing, it's such a waste, isn't it, in that situation for them to go, oh, we're too busy, we're going to have to just either park our OKRs or just drop them or whatever. Because you're right, it is the construct, it's the framework through which they can reprioritize.
Yeah, and when they're still fairly new, when it's still settling in, they're at that point in the change process where it's obviously had a positive impact, but yet when something potentially dire and unexpected shows up, we're there to remind people this is what it's here for, to actually support you through that. Yeah.
And also, if it's that executive that you were talking about there, and I know the situation from afar. I follow US politics and news probably more closely in the UK actually, because it's quite interesting and entertaining at times for the wrong reasons. The changes in federal funding for that type of organisation could have massive strategic implications. Absolutely. So I can understand how there could be anxiety around, OKR, longer term OKRs.
Sure.
But we saw this during the pandemic actually. Our advice was if you are uncertain about the future, then just bring in the time frame on your OKRs to what you can work with, and it might mean that you might feel a bit tactical for the time being, but at least it still gives you. You're still making some effort to define what the priorities are, even if it's in the short term. And then when you feel you've got, a bit more stability, then you can extend that time frame out again.
Yeah, I mean that experience I just shared with you sort of inspired me to do a whole video about OKRs as a change management tool. So that's out there on on PM Squared's YouTube channel, because I think we know this. Like you and I know this. We're framing things that way all the time, but it doesn't hurt to call it out. Like this is really
it doesn't. It doesn't at all. It doesn't at all.
Use.
It doesn't at all. And you touch upon change management there. A big part of the change that usually comes with adopting OKRs or whatever we're going to call them, it is around the rrhythm that comes with them, the cadence that comes with them. And that's something which I don't know about you, but I found has organizations haven't necessarily, unless you're dealing with an organization that has a high level of agile practice built into it. So they're used to doing stand-ups, they're used to doing sprints and that kind of thing. Anything apart from that, I tend to find that it's a big shift. It's quite a task for those organizations to get those, those check-ins, those into those quarterly cycles and so on and so forth. So what's been your experience of it?
I think there's always going to be some maybe early adopter is a way to think about it, but there's always going to be some some leaders in the organization who really get it quickly get the logic, feel freed up and actually energized by how much more effective they can be if they focus in on what's most important rather than statusing, rather than the typical sorts of shifts that we see when people start to use an OKR process. But yeah, there's no doubt that even a team, for example, even a team that has, I'd say, like a pretty good level of what we'd call psychological safety. In other words, people are not, the leaders on that team are not particularly afraid of getting beaten up on. That's not the norm in that business. But even in a team where there's pretty good trust on the team, again, turning up the lights always raises like some amount of angst. So it's a stretch for any team, and so that's a change by itself. And I think I think what you're pointing to is something even bigger, which is there's a ripple effect through many different aspects of the organization when you start to introduce this process. Is that your experience?
Yes, it is. It is, and I think it's I think the transparency and the accountability of the things that make people get a little bit twitchy, even to the point where, and this has probably been more at senior executive level. I've actually seen some executives after an OKR implementation resign, to be honest, because it's not the way that they've wanted to work, or they've ended up, they've for whatever reason they've left the organization, but I think what I'm really sort of driving at here is it's getting into the routine of an OKR squad getting together every 2 weeks or every week or whatever cadence they choose, and going through the stand up and going through the check-in and making sure that the system's updated, and then then rolling up so that the executive team are having that bird's eye view check-in every month, and so on and so forth. And I think to us, we can kind of see it very clearly as to how it all slots together and how it should all roll up and so on and so forth. But I think getting into a cadence is something that I think a lot of teams struggle with, and especially as well, as I mentioned, they're likely to be cross-functional as well. So there may be people who wouldn't necessarily routinely meet in a sort of functional team meeting that might happen once every week or something like that. So there's a new event that has to be created, and it has to become, I don't know whether you'd call it a ritual. Maybe you would. I don't. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's real important to support people at the front end of an implementation and building that habit, building that repetition. I think, like in our experience, there's these light bulb moments when people get the value. Because, everyone is already pretty busy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't recall an organization where it wasn't the case that there was some stress involved in making the time for what seems like a new meeting at the beginning. Even though it may end up saving you a bunch of other meetings that you no longer have to do when you implement this properly. But so we know this, everybody's busy. So I think it's the support needed to help people really have tight, organized performance conversations on a regular basis, long enough for that light bulb to start to go on. And it might be, I clearly remember one fairly new operations leader who, at a certain point, was somewhat hesitant about all, the performance meeting process, because again, the greater transparency. This OKR, I wanted it to be green, it's yellow. I still think we can make it. But the light bulb went on when she got, wow, I'm actually making progress on this thing now that we're tracking it regularly. And that was because there was this meeting where she was going to be showing up every 2 weeks to actually talk about important initiatives. So once that light bulb goes on, then you have something to work with, on the team. And I think that it's helping people stick with the process long enough for that to happen. That's one way it happens. Another way it happens is, and I think like you and I have been talking about this also, is the cross-functional aspect of it, right? The collaborative part where, let's say, an organization was pretty much used to working in silos prior to this. That's another big change that I see often enough, is that if that tone is properly set in the performance meetings, like, we're here to understand how the other leaders' OKRs are impacting me and what impact I have on their OKRs, as a peer, right? So when people start to get the sense not only of that, but what can I do to help, say, that when the problem solving in a performance meeting really turns to becoming useful in an obvious way for people, that's often a new habit. Because people were absorbed in, my plate's already full. I'm just trying to handle my own department or my own business unit. Sparking that collaborative sort of reward is really important.
Yeah, it's cultivating, it's encouraging a growth mindset rather than a fear-based mindset, which is seen when you see that silo working and the conflict and friction that exists between those silos. Yeah. Well put. I've seen that. I've seen that particular breakthrough a number of times. So, with your psychologist hat on, would you what tips, what hacks would you offer for perhaps a team that was looking to develop that habit of getting into doing those check-ins on a regular basis, and indeed the organisation generally? Let's try and get the habit, get the routines of OKRs in place.
I mean, I think repetition is the first thing. It's like, whoever owns that meeting must be committed to it happening, right? And I mean, this sounds so basic. I maybe you were looking for a more sophisticated psychological answer than whatever. But the first thing is, like, do it, like, right? Do the meeting. Use an agenda, like we always provide a model agenda, because speaking of ritual, like if you put a group of people in a room or a virtual room, we will find a way to use that.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really important to have an agenda that's focused and methodically, like, put together. That's one thing. I do think it's important to check in at the end of a meeting. Like, actually, we ask people to score the meeting at the end of every performance meeting. How useful was this? It's good feedback, right? It's good feedback for whoever's running the meeting. It's real important. Again, I think so much of the stuff I'm about to start listing to you, like have an agenda in advance, tell people what the homework is to prep for this thing in advance. I mean, it's very basic, but these are the best practices that are so easy to brush to the side because of the urgency of whatever fire I'm trying to put out, that day. Scoring the OKRs, right? Yeah. I mean, we in advance, right?
Yeah,
really thinking through, like, what do we actually need to talk about this week, right? That's by the way, that's part of the antidote to it becoming like an empty ritual. To use
exactly. Yeah. So it's a focused conversation instead of people just going through their.
It's that 5 whys thing. It's like, why are we doing this? Like, it's keeping that question alive to keep the purpose of the process alive for people.
I mean, I've kind of likened it to learning to drive. So it takes a while, doesn't it, for it to kind of for all that activity to kind of work its way into the routine part of the brain, where it's done almost unconsciously because it's just the way it happens around here,
Right. Right.
And you're right, and it's that repeat. When you're learning to drive, you have to repeat all those different maneuvers, all those different actions, and so on and so forth. So eventually, they do become natural. They become embedded, and I think. I think for the organization collectively to get to that point where it moves from the conscious to the subconscious of the organization, I think that's the process that they go through. By just repeating it.
Absolutely, it's number one, showing up, and number two, understanding what we're here for. What's the purpose of this meeting, right? So it's those two things, I loved what you said about driving a car. I think that's excellent. And I think like the way I see that happening, I think the way we see that happening is when people get the why and the habit is getting built, there's a shift in even how people talk about what they're doing in a performance meeting. At the beginning, let's say we're using the language of objectives and key results. So at the beginning, there's a lot of that lingo is prominent in the air. But as soon as that habit really starts to get built, people are just talking about the work. People are talking about the work and problem solving. It's not about some OKR system. It's not about some theory. It's not about an acronym. It's about like, what are the priorities for my department? Where do I need help from my peers on this team? What are the most important decisions we need to make together? So it becomes, in other words, the acronym or whatever it is falls off, and we're just focused on what are our priorities here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see that sort of the impact. That's
driving, and then you're just driving.
Yeah, exactly. Then you're driving. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're just on autopilot from that point.
Yeah.
I mean, I see usually the first breakthrough when even just at the building stage, when you go from kind of working with the executive team to the next level down, which is what we call the transformational layer. And that's usually where you start to see the cross-functionality come into it.
Sure.
And I can think of a number of projects that I've worked on where that day starts off with people going, why am I here? Why have you, what am I, I've been told what this is about, but why are you involving me? I've never had an input into these things before. And by the end of the day, they're absolutely super stoked because they've actually had the opportunity to contribut and possibly even own what comes out of the day in terms of the next level of OKRs. So and I think there's the implied message in that is we value your input. Yeah, we value your input, and therefore we want you to contribute towards shaping these.
Yeah.
And obviously, from a psychological point of view, there's a much greater chance of somebody feeling a sense of ownership of something they've either created themselves or been involved in creating, rather than something that they've been handed to do. That goes without saying. But I say it goes without saying. It goes without saying for us.
Yeah.
But I still come across. And this usually is teased out. Like I said, we do the work with the leadership teams at first so that we can get everybody on the same page around the principles. One of the principles is don't cascade. Don't cascade in the sense of, well, these are mine, these are my OKRs, so therefore these should be yours. Yeah. Because that's just a complete waterfall and flow through of it, and therefore the person receiving it, it's being done to them, and that's just
Well, I mean, often the way we will stage this in a 5-day workshop is that maybe your core leadership team is center stage, working through the strategy map itself, like mapping the top strategic objectives for the organization. But there's a second ring of people around them, which is the next leaders from the next level down. And they are not only witnessing that, but at certain points they're going to have input into it and be part of that discussion. So we try to make that connection exactly to avoid the problem you were alluding to a minute ago, which is just, some tablets are just coming down from on high that are disconnected. From the rest of the organization. So that input's really important. And I think the other part of the process, in our case at PM Squared, is we actually, once we have that map, we take people through their rating each of their department's impacts on the overall strategy, visually rating it. So they get almost like a heat map of where their department can or team or function has an impact, and to what degree on the top level strategy of the whole organization. And that's another way of really emphasizing, not only because not only where their OKRs are ultimately going to focus, the highest areas of impact, but also the interconnection. Like you really are connected to this top level. It's not separate from you.
Yeah. No, and that goes to the point of trying to sort of, I suppose, in the way you've described it there, kind of visualizes the contribution and the level of contribution which each area is making. And I was only just talking to a client earlier today about how important it is to help, when you're framing an objective, don't just write what it is you're going to do, but also explain why it's important, because that, helps to illustrate the purpose, and those that are working to help achieve it kind of, that's the first part of the jigsaw in helping them to feel a sense of purpose. It won't do it by itself, but it's an important part of the jigsaw, and it all fits together. And if you can then measure the impact and visualize it, that's really powerful. That's really powerful. Yeah. Marc, I'm conscious of time, and I think we've pretty much covered all the bases that we were intending to cover today. Just to wrap up, are there any resources? You mentioned a video earlier about change management or anything like that. Is there anything you'd like to just mention to the listeners that we can then put in the show notes so that they could go and have a look at if needs be?
Absolutely. There's playlists on PM Squared's YouTube channel that are immediately accessible to get a sense of a lot of what I've been referring to with shorthand, like impact or impact ontology or strategy mapping. So there'll be plenty of illustrations of that on our YouTube channel, PM Squared.
Okay, excellent. We should make sure that's in the show notes. Thank you again so much. I hope the fog clears soon so that you can see the beautiful Bay Area.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Okay, all right. And you too. And thanks very much, folks, for tuning in to another episode of Giant Talk. And I look forward to having you with us again soon. Take care now.